The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast ocean of gold and silence. The sun hovered high above, unforgiving and constant, casting sharp shadows across the jagged rocks and dry earth. Eliza Carter stumbled forward, her boots scraping against the uneven ground, her breath shallow from exhaustion. She had stopped counting the days. At first, she had tried to keep track, marking lines in the dirt, whispering numbers under her breath as she walked. But hunger, thirst, and fear had blurred time into something shapeless. Now, there was only movement, only survival, and the quiet, too quiet. Back in the settlement, silence had never existed. There had always been voices, orders, expectations, rules. Her life had been planned before she even understood what choice meant, where she would live, who she would marry, what she would become. She had nodded, she had obeyed, until she couldn't anymore. The night she ran, she didn't take much. Just a small canteen, a piece of cloth for shade, and the courage he didn't know she had. She didn't even know where she was going, only that she needed to leave. But out here, freedom came with a cost. Eliza paused, leaning against a sun-warmed rock. Her lips were dry, cracked from dehydration. She lifted her canteen and shook it gently. Empty. A wave of panic rose in her chest, but she forced it down. Panic wouldn't help. Panic would only make her weak. Think, she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse. Just keep thinking. She had heard stories about this land. Stories whispered in warning, passed from one fearful voice to another. They said the desert belonged to the Apaches. They said outsiders didn't last long here. They said if you wandered too far, you wouldn't come back. Eliza squeezed her eyes shut. No, she murmured. Don't think about that. But the stories lingered, curling through her thoughts like shadows. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper. Every shifting rock felt like a step behind her. She pushed herself forward again. The ground sloped downward into a narrow canyon, its walls rising like silent guardians on either side. The air here felt slightly cooler, the sunlight less harsh. Eliza moved carefully, her hand brushing against the stone for balance. Then she stopped. There on the ground, footprints. Her breath caught. They weren't hers. They were fresh. Eliza's heart began to race. She spun around, scanning the canyon, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow. There was no one, no movement, no sound except the wind slipping through the rocks. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave. She wasn't alone. A chill ran through her, despite the heat. Instinct told her to run, to hide, to disappear like she had been doing for days. Without thinking, she stepped off the main path and slipped behind a cluster of boulders. She crouched low, pulling her cloth tighter around her shoulders, trying to steady her breathing. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. The silence returned, heavy and complete. Slowly, cautiously, Eliza peeked out from behind the rocks. The canyon looked the same. Empty, endless. Had she imagined it? Her body sagged slightly with relief, but the unease remained, deep and quiet, like something watching from just beyond sight. She stayed hidden for a while longer before finally stepping back onto the path. I'm just tired, she told herself. That's all this is. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Eliza found a small hollow between rocks, a place just hidden enough to feel safe. She sank down onto the ground, her legs trembling with exhaustion. For a moment, she simply sat there, staring at the fading light. Then softly, she spoke. I made the right choice, didn't I? The question lingered in the air, unanswered. Back in the settlement, everything had been certain, safe, controlled. Out here, there was nothing but uncertainty. And yet, she was free. Eliza pulled her knees to her chest, resting her head against them. The wind whispered gently around her, carrying with it the scent of dust and something else, something unfamiliar, almost comforting. Her eyes grew heavy, but just before sleep took her, that feeling returned, that quiet, unshakable sense that somewhere, beyond the fading light and the silent rocks, someone was watching. Not with anger, not with harm, but with patience and understanding. Eliza didn't see him. She didn't hear him. But deep in the stillness of the desert, night, she was no longer alone. Night settled gently over the desert, wrapping the land in cool shadows and quiet stillness. The harsh heat of the day faded, replaced by a soft, whispering wind that moved through the canyon like a secret. Eliza Carter slept lightly, curled between the rocks where she had hidden herself. Even in rest, her body remained tense, as if it refused to fully trust the silence around her. Every small sound, the shifting of sand, the distant cry of a night bird, pulled her closer to waking. But she didn't know. She was being watched. Not in the way she feared, not by something cruel or hunting. From a distance, standing on higher ground where the moonlight traced his outline against the stone, Dakota observed her quietly. He had seen her long before she noticed the footprints. From the moment she crossed into this land, he had been aware of her presence. An outsider, alone, unprepared for the desert's unforgiving nature. At first, he had simply followed out of caution. Strangers in this land were rare, and when they came, they were often lost or running from something. Eliza was both. Dakota's gaze softened slightly as he watched her shift in her sleep, her brow furrowed even in rest. She looked nothing like the stories he had heard about outsiders who wandered too far. There was no arrogance in her, no carelessness, only exhaustion, only determination. She had walked farther than most would have, and she had not given up. That, more than anything, caught his attention. He moved silently along the ridge, his steps light, practiced, almost invisible against the earth. Years of living with the land had taught him how to become part of it, to walk without sound, to observe without being seen. Below, Eliza stirred again. Her hand instinctively reached for the empty canteen beside her. Even in sleep, her body remembered thirst. Dakota's expression grew thoughtful. She wouldn't last much longer like this. The desert did not forgive weakness. It did not wait for anyone to find their strength. It simply took. But Dakota did not step forward. Not yet. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the narrow canyon path ahead of her. He knew this land well, every hidden stream, every shaded hollow, every place where life still lingered despite the dryness. There was water not far from here, but she would not find it on her own. For a moment, he stood still, as if weighing a decision that only he could understand. Then, quietly, he moved. Before the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Dakota descended into the canyon. He approached carefully, his presence as soft as the wind itself. Eliza remained asleep, unaware of how close he stood, just a few steps away now. For the first time, he saw her clearly. Dust covered her clothes. Her hands were scraped and tired. Strands of her hair clung to her face, damp from the heat of the day before. She looked fragile, but he knew she wasn't. Fragile things didn't survive out here for days. Fragile things didn't keep walking when everything in their body told them to stop. He crouched briefly, placing something near the edge of her shelter, a small marking, almost unnoticeable unless you knew what to look for. A sign, a direction, a path forward. Then he stepped back, his movements careful, deliberate. He did not want to startle her, did not want to become something she feared. Not yet. As the sky slowly began to lighten, Dakota disappeared once more into the rocks above, returning to the quiet distance where he had been before. When Eliza awoke, the world felt different, cooler, quieter. For a moment, she didn't move. She simply listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just the wind. She exhaled slowly, pushing herself upright. Her muscles ached, her throat dry, her body heavy with fatigue. "I have to keep moving," she whispered. But as she reached for her things, something caught her eye. A small marking in the sand. Her breath stilled. She hadn't made that. Carefully, she leaned closer, studying it. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was placed. Intentional. A direction. Her heart began to race again. But this time, the feeling was different. Not just fear. Something else. Something she couldn't quite name. She looked up, scanning the canyon walls, the ridges above, the endless stretch of desert beyond. "Hello?" she called softly. No answer. Only silence. But the feeling returned. That quiet, steady awareness. Someone had been here. Someone had seen her. And instead of harm, they had left her a way forward. Eliza hesitated. Every story she had ever heard told her to run, to ignore it, to trust nothing. But her body, her instincts, said something else. Slowly, she stood. Her eyes returned to the marking one last time. Then, with a deep breath, she made a choice. She followed it. High above, unseen and silent, Dakota watched her take the first step, and for the first time he knew she might survive. The sun had begun its slow climb again, casting soft gold across the canyon walls. Eliza followed the markings carefully, her steps slower now, not just from exhaustion, but from awareness. Every movement felt, noticed, not hunted, not chased, but seen. The difference unsettled her more than fear ever had. She kept glancing behind her, scanning the ridges, the shadows, the narrow paths between rocks. Nothing moved, nothing revealed itself. And yet, the feeling stayed. The marking had led her farther than she expected. The canyon opened slightly, widening just enough to let more light in. The air shifted to cooler, fresher. Then she heard it, a faint sound. Water. Eliza froze. At first, she thought it was her imagination playing tricks again, but when she held her breath and listened closely, it came again, a soft, gentle trickle echoing faintly through the stone. Her heart leaped. She moved faster now, her tired legs pushing forward with sudden urgency. Turning around a bend in the canyon, she finally saw it, a narrow stream, hidden between rocks, its surface glimmering under the sunlight like something out of a dream. For a moment, Eliza just stood there, unable to believe it was real. Then, she rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside it. Her hands trembled as she dipped them into the cool water, bringing it quickly to her lips. Relief flooded through her. She drank slowly at first, then more, until the dryness in her throat eased and her body began to feel alive again. Tears filled her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. "I am going to be okay," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew something. She hadn't found this on her own. Someone had led her here. The realization settled heavily in her chest. She wasn't alone. Eliza remained by the water longer than she intended, gathering her strength. The fear that had driven her for days began to shift into something quieter, more uncertain. Whoever had helped her hadn't revealed themselves. Why? If they meant harm, they could have acted already. If they meant kindness, why stay hidden? She stood slowly, brushing dust from her clothes, her gaze lifting toward the canyon walls once more. "I know you're there," she said, her voice steady but soft. The words echoed faintly, disappearing into the vast silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a presence. Not a sound, not movement, just a shift in the air that made her breath catch. And then she saw him. Standing at a distance, partially framed by the rock and light, was a man. Still, calm, watching. Eliza's body went rigid. Her heart pounded against her ribs as every story she had ever heard rushed back into her mind all at once. Apache. The word echoed inside her like a warning. Her first instinct was to run. Her muscles tensed, her breath quickened. Her eyes darted toward the path behind her. But something stopped her. He wasn't moving. He wasn't approaching. He simply stood there. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable, but not threatening, not aggressive, just present. Eliza swallowed hard, her voice barely steady. "Did you do this?" she asked, gesturing toward the stream. No answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Then, slowly, he took a single step forward. Eliza flinched, but he stopped immediately, as if understanding her reaction before she even spoke it. And then, for the first time, he spoke. His voice was low, calm, and steady like the quiet flow of the water beside her. "You are not alone." The words settled into the space between them, simple and unforced. Eliza blinked, caught off guard. That wasn't what she expected. No threats, no commands, no anger, just reassurance. Her heart still raced. Her instinct still screamed at her to run. But something else pushed back against that fear. Curiosity. Confusion. A strange sense of calm she didn't understand. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice softer. Now, again, he didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained on her, steady but not intrusive, as if giving her space even in silence. Finally, he spoke again. "Because you needed it, that was all." No explanation, no expectation, just truth. Eliza felt something shift inside her, small, almost unnoticeable, but real. The fear didn't disappear, but it changed. It softened at the edges. Still, it was too much, too sudden. Without another word, she stepped back, then turned and ran. She didn't stop for a long time. Her breath came in sharp bursts, her feet stumbling over the uneven ground as she put distance between herself and the place she had just been. Her mind raced even faster than her body. He wasn't what she expected. That was the problem. If he had been cruel, she could have understood it. If he had been threatening, she could have run without hesitation. But he hadn't been. He had been calm, patient, kind, and that terrified her more than anything. Finally, when her body could go no farther, she slowed to a stop, bending slightly as she tried to catch her breath. The desert stretched around her once again, wide and endless. Alone. Or not. Eliza straightened slowly, her chest rising and falling. Her eyes drifted back in the direction she had come from. "He said I'm not alone," she whispered. The words lingered in her mind, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if running was the right choice. The desert felt different now. Eliza walked slower than before, no longer driven purely by fear, but pulled by something far more complicated. The wind still whispered through the rocks. The sun still stretched endlessly above, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't just running anymore. She was thinking. Her steps became uncertain, almost hesitant, as if every direction she could take now carried a question instead of an answer. Why didn't he follow? That thought lingered the most. When she had turned and run, she had expected to hear footsteps behind her. She had expected pursuit, urgency, something that confirmed her fear. But there had been nothing. No sound. No presence closing in. Just silence. Eliza stopped walking. The realization settled over her slowly. He had let her go. She turned slightly, glancing back over her shoulder at the path she had taken. The canyon stretched behind her, quiet and empty, as if nothing had happened there at all. But she knew it had. She pressed her lips together, her thoughts racing. If he wanted to hurt me, she murmured, he already could have. The truth of that was undeniable. He had been close enough to speak softly, calmly close enough that she had seen his face, his stillness, the absence of anything threatening in his posture. And yet, he hadn't taken a single step beyond what she allowed. Eliza let out a slow breath, her shoulders lowering slightly. For days, she had been surviving on instinct alone. Run, hide, don't trust. But now, for the first time, that instinct felt incomplete. As the day wore on, the heat returned, pressing down heavily on the land. Eliza searched for shade and found a narrow overhang carved into the rock. She slipped beneath it, grateful for the brief escape from the sun. Sitting down, she pulled her knees close and stared out at the open desert. Her mind replayed the moment over and over again. His voice. You are not alone. There had been no force in it, no demand, just a simple truth, spoken as if it didn't need to be proven. Eliza frowned slightly. Why does that bother me? She whispered. Because part of her believed him. That was the problem. It would have been easier if everything she had ever been told was true, if fear had been justified, if running had been the only answer. But now there was doubt, and doubt made everything harder. As the sun began to lower again, casting longer shadows across the land, Eliza pushed herself back to her feet. She needed to move, but this time, she didn't move blindly. She paid attention to the ground, to the wind, to the quiet patterns she hadn't noticed before. And then she saw it. Another marking. Subtle, almost invisible. But now she recognized it. Her heart skipped. He's still guiding me, she said softly. She looked up quickly, scanning the rocks, the ridges, the endless horizon. Nothing. But she knew. He was there, watching, not chasing, not forcing. Just there. Eliza hesitated. Her instincts clashed again, fear pulling her one way, curiosity the other. This could be a trap, she said under her breath. But even as she said it, the thought felt weaker than it had before. Traps didn't lead to water. Traps didn't step back when you ran. Traps didn't speak gently. Her gaze returned to the marking. It pointed forward. A path. A choice. Eliza swallowed, her fingers curling slightly at her sides. For so long, every choice in her life had been made for her. Even running had been a reaction, a desperate escape from something she didn't want. But this was different. This was a decision. Slowly, she took a step forward, then another. She followed the marking. The path led her through a quieter stretch of land, where the wind softened and the ground felt more stable beneath her feet. As she walked, the tension in her body eased just slightly, not gone, but no longer overwhelming. And with each step, something unexpected grew inside her. Trust. Not complete, not certain, but beginning. When the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in warm shades of gold and amber, Eliza reached a small clearing surrounded by tall rock formations. It felt protected, safe. She stopped in the center, turning slowly as she took it in. This isn't random, she realized. This place had been chosen for her. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something deeper. Emotion she didn't fully understand. She lifted her gaze toward the rocks. I know you're here, she said again, her voice steadier this time. The wind answered softly. Nothing else. Eliza waited. Moments passed. Still nothing. And yet, she didn't feel alone. The sky burned softly with shades of amber and fading gold as the sun slipped behind the distant horizon. The desert, once harsh and blinding, now felt calm, almost gentle. Eliza sat quietly in the center of the clearing, her knees drawn close, her hands resting loosely in her lap. For the first time in days, her breathing was steady. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't running. She was waiting. The realization felt strange. A few days ago, the idea of waiting for anything, for anyone, would have terrified her. Waiting meant being found. Waiting meant losing control, But now, it felt different. Now, it felt like a choice. The air shifted slightly, a soft breeze brushing against her skin. Eliza lifted her head, her eyes scanning the tall rock formations surrounding her. "I know you're there," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake this time. Silence answered at first, but it wasn't empty silence. It was full, present, and then a figure stepped forward from the shadows. Eliza's breath caught. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving her time to see him, to understand that he wasn't hiding anymore. Dakota, the distance between them was still there, but it felt smaller now, not because of steps taken, but because something unseen had changed. Eliza stood, her body instinctively tensing, but she didn't step back. She didn't run. They faced each other in the fading light, the space between them filled with unspoken questions. Dakota stopped a few steps away, his posture calm, his gaze steady, but not overwhelming. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to close the distance. He simply stood there, present, real. Eliza studied him more closely this time. There was no anger in his expression, no force, only quiet certainty. "You've been following me," she said, her voice soft but direct. It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. Dakota gave a small, almost unnoticeable nod. "Yes." No denial. No excuse. Just truth. Eliza swallowed, her heart beating a little faster, not from fear this time, but from the weight of the moment. "Why?" she asked. The question lingered between them, carried gently by the evening air. Dakota didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her, not just at her face, but as if he saw everything she had been through. The exhaustion, the strength, the quiet determination that had carried her this far. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, steady, certain, "Because you kept going." Eliza blinked, caught off guard. "That's not an answer," she said, though her tone lacked the sharpness she expected from herself. "It is," he replied simply. Something about the way he said it made her pause. He wasn't trying to convince her. He wasn't trying to make her understand. He was just speaking what he believed, the truth as he saw it. Eliza's gaze dropped for a moment, her thoughts shifting. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Back in the settlement, she had been seen for what she was expected to be, not for what she endured, not for what she chose. But here, this man, this stranger, had watched her struggle, watched her survive, and instead of judging her, he had respected her. The realization settled deep within her chest. She looked up again. "You could have come closer before," she said. "When I was weaker." "Yes. And you didn't." "No, why?" "This time." Dakota's answer came without hesitation. "Because you were not ready." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Eliza felt something shift again, stronger this time. Not fear, not confusion, something steadier, something grounding. She took a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. The space between them no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like respect. Silence settled again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was shared. Then, after a moment, Dakota took one small step forward. Eliza noticed, but she didn't move away. He stopped again, still leaving distance, still giving her control over how close this moment would become. And then he spoke, softly, clearly. "I found you." The words hung in the air, quiet but powerful. Eliza's breath caught. There was no claim in his voice. No ownership. No demand. It didn't feel like being captured. It felt like being seen, truly seen, for who she was, and for what she had chosen. Her chest tightened, emotion rising unexpectedly. "All this time," she whispered, almost to herself, "you were there." Dakota didn't respond. He didn't need to. She already knew. Eliza took a small step forward. This time, it was her choice, her decision, her movement. The distance between them closed just slightly, but enough to change everything. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, not for answers, but for truth. And for the first time, she didn't see a stranger. She didn't see something to fear. She saw someone who had waited, someone who had protected without control, someone who had found her without ever taking her freedom away. The wind moved softly between them, carrying away the last of her hesitation. And in that quiet, golden moment, Eliza realized something she never expected. Being found wasn't something to fear. Not when it came with a choice. and for the first time since she had run, she didn't want to run anymore. Morning came softly, as if the desert itself had decided not to rush the day. Eliza woke to a quiet she had never known before, not the tense silence of fear, but something calmer, steadier. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of earth and wind. For a moment, she simply lay there, staring at the pale sky above her, letting the stillness settle inside her. Then she remembered Dakota. She sat up quickly, her eyes scanning the clearing. He wasn't there. A flicker of something unexpected passed through her disappointment. Eliza frowned slightly at herself. Why does that matter? She murmured. But deep down, she knew. Because his presence had changed something. It had made the vast emptiness feel less empty. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her clothes, her gaze drifting toward the edges of the clearing. There were no footprints, no obvious signs that he had been there at all. And yet, she knew he had. Her eyes moved across the ground, and then she saw it. Another marking. Subtle. Intentional. Her breath softened. He's still here, she whispered. But this time, the realization didn't bring fear. It brought a strange sense of reassurance. Eliza followed the marking as the morning light grew stronger. The path led her through a stretch of land she hadn't seen before, less harsh, more alive. Small plants pushed through the dry earth. The wind carried a different tone, softer, almost welcoming. She paid closer attention now to everything. The way the ground shifted beneath her feet, the direction of the breeze, the patterns in the rocks. It was as if the desert wasn't just something to survive anymore. It was something to understand. She didn't see Dakota at first, but she felt him. That same quiet awareness, like a presence just beyond sight. Then, as she stepped into a narrow passage between two large rock formations, she heard his voice. Stop. Eliza froze instantly. Her heart jumped, but she didn't panic. Not this time. She turned slightly, and there he was standing a short distance behind her, calm as ever. You walk too quickly, he said. His tone wasn't harsh. It wasn't a command. It was guidance. Eliza tilted her head slightly, confused. If I walk slower, I won't get anywhere, she replied. Dakota shook his head gently. If you walk too quickly, you will miss what keeps you safe. The words made her pause. She hadn't thought of it that way. He stepped forward just one step and pointed toward the ground ahead of her. Look. Eliza followed his gesture. At first, she saw nothing. Then, she noticed it. The ground changed slightly, a faint shift in color, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. What is that? She asked. Unstable ground, he said. It will not hold your weight. Her breath caught. She had been about to step right onto it. Eliza glanced back at him, a mix of surprise and realization in her eyes. You saw that from a distance? He nodded. I have walked this land my whole life. Something about the way he said it carried quiet pride, but not arrogance, just truth. Eliza looked back at the ground, then carefully stepped around it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said softly, You could have just told me to avoid it. Dakota's gaze remained steady. You needed to see it. Eliza let out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh. That seems to be your way. He didn't deny it. They walked together for a short while after that, but not side by side. Not close. There was still space between them, but it no longer felt like distance. It felt like respect. As they moved, Dakota pointed out small things Eliza would have never noticed on her own. How to read the direction of the wind. How to find shade before the heat became too strong. How to recognize which plants held moisture. Eliza listened carefully, absorbing everything. You're not just helping me survive, she said at one point. You're teaching me. Dakota glanced at her briefly. Yes. Why? This time. His answer was different. Because you are learning. Eliza smiled faintly at that. It wasn't a complete answer, but she was beginning to understand that he didn't explain things the way she expected. He showed, he guided, and he trusted her to figure the rest out. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a place where the land opened slightly, offering a view of the distant horizon. Dakota stopped. Eliza noticed immediately. She turned to him. You're not coming any farther, are you? It wasn't a question. He shook his head. This is where my people's land begins. Eliza's chest tightened slightly. So, this is as far as I go. Dakota studied her for a moment. No, he said calmly. This is where you choose. The words settled deeply. Eliza looked past him, toward the unseen land beyond, then back at him. You're not going to tell me what to do, she said. It wasn't frustration. The horizon stretched endlessly before them, painted in soft shades of light and distance. The wind moved gently across the open land, no longer harsh or uncertain but steady, like a quiet presence that had always been there. Eliza stood still, her eyes fixed on the unseen world ahead. Behind her lay everything she had escaped. In front of her, everything she didn't yet understand. And beside her, though not too close, never too close to Dakota. Waiting, not urging, not guiding. This time, just there. The silence between them felt different now. It wasn't filled with questions about survival or fear. It was filled with something deeper. Truth. Eliza exhaled slowly, her shoulders rising and falling as if she were preparing for something far more difficult than crossing the desert. I didn't just leave, she said quietly. Her voice felt heavier than before. Dakota didn't respond, but she knew he was listening. I ran, she continued, from everything. Her gaze dropped slightly, her fingers curling at her sides. For a long time, I told myself it was about freedom, about wanting something different. She paused, her voice tightening just a little. But that's not the whole truth. The wind shifted, brushing softly past them, carrying her words into the open space. Eliza swallowed, her chest tightening as memories she had tried to push away began to rise again. They had already decided my life, she said. Who I would marry, where I would live, what I would be. Her lips pressed together. I didn't choose any of it. Dakota's gaze remained steady, his expression unchanged, but not distant. Present, understanding. I tried to accept it, she went on. I told myself it was easier that way, safer. Her voice softened, almost breaking. But every day, it felt like I was disappearing. The words lingered in the air, raw and honest. For a moment, Eliza said nothing more. She simply stood there, letting the truth exist outside of her for the first time. Then she looked at him. I wasn't just running toward something, she said quietly. I was running away from becoming someone I didn't recognize. Dakota held her gaze, and when he spoke, his voice was calm, steady, unchanged from the moment she first heard it. You chose to leave. Eliza blinked slightly. That doesn't feel like much of a choice, she admitted. It is, he replied. The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard again. She let out a small, uncertain breath. It didn't feel strong, she said. It felt desperate. Dakota shook his head gently. Leaving what binds you is never weakness. The words settled deeply. Eliza felt something shift inside her, not sudden, not overwhelming, but real. For so long, she had seen her escape as something uncertain, something she might regret. But now, she began to see it differently. Not as running away, but as choosing herself. The silence returned, but this time it felt lighter, less burdened. Eliza glanced out at the horizon again. What happens now? She asked. It was the question she had been avoiding, the one that mattered most. Dakota didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped slightly to the side, not closer to her, but enough to change the space between them, not blocking her path, not directing it, just making it clear the way forward was hers. You decide, he said. Eliza frowned slightly. That's all you ever say? A faint hint of something almost like amusement touched his expression. Because it is always true. She shook her head softly, though a small smile tugged at her lips. You make everything sound simple. It is simple, he replied. Not easy. Eliza let out a quiet breath. That made sense. Her eyes moved once more between the two directions before her. The past, the unknown. For a moment, doubt tried to return. The familiar pull of safety. The question of whether she should go back, fix what she left behind, return to what she understood, even if it meant losing herself again. But then she remembered something. The nights in the settlement, the silence that wasn't peaceful, the life that had been chosen for her. And then she remembered the desert, the fear, the struggle, the moment she stood alone and kept going anyway. And she remembered him, not forcing, not taking, not deciding for her, just seeing her, believing she could choose. Eliza took a slow breath, then another, and something inside her settled. She turned fully toward Dakota. I don't want to go back, she said. Her voice was steady, certain, not loud, but strong. Dakota didn't react with surprise. He didn't step forward. He didn't reach for her. He simply nodded once, as if he had always known she would come to that answer herself. Eliza felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For the first time, she wasn't questioning her choice. She wasn't running from anything. She was choosing where to stand. The wind moved gently around them, carrying the last of the hesitation away. Eliza glanced toward the land beyond him, the place he had not crossed, then back at him. You said this is where I choose, she said. He nodded. She stepped forward, not quickly, not uncertainly, just one step. But it changed everything. She wasn't following. She wasn't being led. She was moving forward because she wanted to. Dakota remained still, watching her, giving her the space to make that step fully her own. And as Eliza crossed the invisible line between what she knew and what she didn't, she realized something that had been waiting for her all along. She hadn't just escaped her past. She had found her voice. And this time it was hers. The step Eliza took was small, but it carried the weight of everything she had been and everything she was becoming. As her foot touched the ground beyond the invisible boundary, the world didn't change in any dramatic way. The sky remained wide and endless. The wind still moved gently across the land, and the desert stretched just as far as before. And yet, everything felt different because this time she had chosen it. Eliza paused for a moment after crossing, her breath steady, her heart calm. She looked down briefly, as if expecting to feel something shift beneath her, but the change wasn't around her. It was within her, for the first time. She didn't feel like she was running from anything. She wasn't escaping. She wasn't hiding. She was simply moving forward, behind her. The past no longer pulled as strongly as it once had. The fear, the expectations, the life that had been decided for her, before she even understood what it meant to choose, all of it still existed. But it no longer controlled her. Eliza slowly turned. Dakota stood where he had been, just at the edge of the land he called home. His posture was the same calm, steady, patient. He hadn't moved. He hadn't followed her, and somehow that mattered more than anything else. He had given her the space to take that step completely on her own. Eliza studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You are not going to stop me," she said. It wasn't a challenge. It was an understanding. Dakota shook his head gently. "No." A small breath of something like relief escaped her. "And you are not going to ask me to stay either," she added again. He shook his head. No, the answer settled between them, simple and clear. Eliza felt a soft smile form, barely there, but real. "You really meant it," she said. "About choosing," Dakota's gaze held hers. "It is the only way a path belongs to you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything that didn't need to be said. Eliza glanced out at the land ahead of her. It was unfamiliar, uncertain, but it didn't feel frightening anymore. It felt open. Then she looked back at him. There was no pressure in his presence. No expectation. Just quiet patience, and something else, respect. That was what made the difference. Not just that he had helped her survive, not just that he had guided her, but that he had never taken her choice away. Even now, even here, Eliza took a few slow steps forward, deeper into the land. Each step felt lighter than the last, more certain, more hers. She stopped after a short distance and turned again. Dakota was still there, watching. Not distant, not close, exactly where he had always been, far enough to give her space, close enough that she was never truly alone. Eliza hesitated for just a moment, then she spoke. "You said you found me." Her voice carried clearly across the space between them. Dakota nodded once. "Yes." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes searching his face. "But you never tried to keep me." "No, why?" The question lingered. It was the last one, the one that mattered most. Dakota's answer came as it always had, calm, steady, certain. "Because you are not something to be kept." The words settled into her, deeper than anything else he had said. Eliza felt her chest tighten, not with pain, but with something warmer, understanding. For so long, her life had been about belonging to something, a place, a plan, an expectation. But this was different. This was about belonging to herself. The wind moved softly between them, carrying the quiet weight of the moment. Eliza looked ahead once more, then back at him. And then she smiled. Not out of relief, not out of uncertainty, but out of knowing. Slowly, she turned her body fully toward him again, and began to walk back. Not because she had to, not because she was asked, but because she wanted to. Dakota didn't move. He didn't step forward. He simply watched her, just as he had from the beginning. But this time, everything was different, because she wasn't being found. She was choosing where she belonged. When she reached him, she stopped just a few steps away, closer than before, closer than she had ever allowed. The space between them was no longer